Welcome, everybody, to DAT Poker Podcast, episode number 7. This is presented by Daniel Nguyen's Masterclass of Poker. I'm your host, A. Schwartz, alongside Roscoe P. Coltrane.
The two birds stoned at once.
Terrence Chan.
How are you? Just the word happy Thanksgiving, boys.
And Mr. Daniel Nguyen in Las Vegas, who is a Canadian, but he's not celebrating Thanksgiving. Well, vegetarian Thanksgiving, I'm guessing, when he does have Thanksgiving. But Daniel, yeah, it's Thanksgiving up here at home.
Yeah, I never really cared about Thanksgiving before, and I don't now. What I do care about is when you say DAT Poker Podcast, you sound like the whitest human being I've ever heard. You're like, it's DAT Poker Podcast, yo.
DAT. Come
That's
on.
What's up? Yeah.
I'm pretty white. There's no question about it.
That's correct.
All right, Terrence. I want to do quickly. I don't know if the rest of you guys were watching the fight. I know Terrence was. Likely Ross was. The big McGregor fight this weekend against Habib. Can't pronounce his last name. Interesting.
Nurmagomedov. Come on, you're at least Hockey UI. Russian name should Russian name shouldn't be that hard.
Well, because it's just easier to call him Habib, and everybody calls him, so I don't bother.
Yeah, fair enough.
Give me your take.
Habib and Conor. I mean, fight was again the fantastic wrestler against fantastic striker, and the wrestler dominated this one. It was great. I mean, I think it lived up to the hype. Probably the biggest fight in UFC history. Probably did around 2 million pay-per-views, which is gigantic. But obviously the little Donnybrook, as we like to say up north, that followed afterwards, complete and utter bullshit. Really stupid at the end of the day, because I think like Habib on the biggest, any time I think you fight Conor McGregor, it's like an opportunity to build your brand. And unfortunately, he chose to build his brand in a somewhat thuggish way by jumping into the audience and attacking some guy he doesn't like, who's part of Conor's training entourage. And yeah, I mean, that sucks. But other stars were made on the night. If you watch the prelims, like Scott Wilson, who I think, as you know, doesn't really even like MMA. He was ranting and raving about the co-main, talking about how awesome it was. I'm talking about Tony Ferguson. Derek Lewis giving one of the all-time greatest post-fight interviews. Check that one out if you haven't. Just Google Derek Lewis UFC 229 interview. You'll probably be able to find it. I think he gained like 500,000 Instagram followers from one 5-minute interview. But yeah, hell, it's MMA. Wacky shit happens. I mean, it happens in boxing too. Tyson Holyfield turned into a riot at I think it was the MGM back in the day, or maybe it was even Caesars. I think it was MGM. But luckily, no riot in Las Vegas, at least.
You gamble on this stuff. Do you still do the fantasy MMA stuff?
I do that all. Yeah, I mean, I'm mostly. I would say I'm mostly these days like a silent partner when it comes to MMA. And I do like bet on fights, but I don't bet as crazy and as big as I used to, unless something is like insane, like the Conor versus Floyd Mayweather fight. I unloaded pretty big on that one, but I bet small on this fight.
Yeah, so I didn't actually watch the fight. I'm not a big fight guy, but I did, obviously hear about all the melee and what happened. And I saw I saw people on Twitter, of course, like everyone's talking about it. I saw something Matt Glenn said, and I agree with him like 1,000%. And, a lot of people talking about how this is a black mark on the sport and all this stuff. That's complete bullshit. Like stuff like this, as bad as it might be for like Habib in terms of his like ability to endorse certain products, for UFC itself, it's showing the passion, showing the craziness, showing the wildness, and like, that anything can happen kind of like pay-per-view stuff that everyone's going to want to see live. Like overall, people love drama, right? And like typically a fight ends and people are like, okay, it's over. But this was not like that. This was like old school when I watched WWF when I was a kid, and it was like insanity. I don't know. Do you agree, Terrence? Or do you?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think the big difference is now we're at the point where like MMA is mostly accepted in most countries, and I mean like legally. So the UFC actually had a battle that's very like parallel to poker. It was originally like they ran the first one in Colorado, and then they tried to run it in some other states, and they got like banned. And then like John McCain actually tried to like institute like a federal ban, put together some votes of that, and then they had to go like state by state legislature to one state by one get it legal. It was legal in like 49 out of 50 for a really long time, and then finally got out in New York. Does stop me if this sounds familiar? By the way, like obviously the parallels to online poker are clearly there, but now it's legal in every state. It's legal in most countries. So now that they've sort of crossed that hurdle, I don't see something like this being like, you're not going to suddenly have like, a bunch of countries go the other way and be like, oh, we can't have this in our country. Somebody think of the children and that kind of stuff. But yeah, when Conor McGregor threw a dolly through a bus and like injured a bunch of people, the UFC came out and said, oh, this is terrible. This is not what we're about. This is not part of our sport, and we're a real sport and we're legitimate and all that. And then they go ahead and, in the lead up to this fight, they use that footage over and over. And of course, they're going to use the footage of Khabib jumping into the crowd like a crazy person going into the next fight. But yeah, I mean, it's embarrassing because I think sort of, and again, we draw like the parallels of poker, like I'm somebody who loves the sport. I'm passionate about the sport. I compete in this sport because I love it so much, even though like I'm an old, unathletic, small man. It's like, but at the end of the day, the UFC probably end up making money on this. Yeah, they probably do. You're right.
Yeah, you made a really good parallel with poker, and it makes me think of like the old question, is it good or bad for poker when Phil Hellmuth has his antics and blow up, right? Like as a purist for the sport, you're a high level player, you see Phil Hellmuth representing you and you're like, this is kind of embarrassing. But guess what? Phil Hellmuth gets into mainstream discussion, people talk about him, much like I think is the case here. So as much as like, we all talk about let's have a clean and respectful poker sport or whatever, the truth is, the bottom line is, it's drama's where it's at. And, that's true across most, even in politics. It's all about drama these days. We got a new reality TV show.
I mean, that's why Conor's so famous, because he creates so much drama and then backs it up.
Does he back it up? He's lost 3 out of his last 5 fights or whatever. I saw a quote.
Well, yeah. He built his brand by backing it up. Yeah. Now he's just raking in the cash.
Speaking of MMA fights, Terrence, November 16th, Calgary, Alberta is the site of your next fight for the... remind me of the belts again. It's the flyweight.
It is the unified MMA title. It'll be, contested at flyweight, which is the weight class I compete in. I'll be fighting Chad Henniger, who's on a 5-fight.
I'm the Highlander! Hit him in the face!
That's a lot of yelling. More yelling than music. Yeah, he's on a 5-fight win streak. He's a guy fighting out of Calgary, so I'm going into his town and trying to steal his belt from him.
Okay, so I know you've read this because you've probably got this written on your training wall. He says, I'm winning this fight. There's no way I'm not. I know Terrence is tough and he does a lot of things well, but I'm better at him everywhere. He's going to pick how he's going to lose and the fans are going to be on their feet. I mean, regular trash talk. Have you been giving it back to him?
I don't know, and in fact, I think as trash talk goes, I think that's actually pretty respectable. I mean, I haven't watched a lot of what he's said. I think I did catch that, but I think he's been respectful. I mean, he's being confident. I don't think he's not saying he says I know Terrence is tough and he does some things well, but I'm better than him. He doesn't say like, hey, this guy's a bum and I'm going to finish him in the first round or something like that. I mean, I'm fine with that. He's confident. I'm confident too. I think I'm going to beat him everywhere.
Well, he says so he says he thinks he's better than you everywhere. Like, I don't know if this is giving away too much info, but like, is there a specific area where you think he's like definitely wrong and you have an advantage?
Yes, and I won't say where. How's that?
That's fair.
Can there really be a good MMA fighter named Chad? That can't be a really good name for an MMA fighter.
Yeah, but what about Einhalinga? That sounds like a tough dude.
There you go. Well, Adam was worried that my last opponent was named Kladnjakovic, and he thought that was a tough sounding name. But I dealt with him.
You got him.
Actually, if you remember, it's I think Scott Wilson, the aforementioned, sent me a message, and Rich Corbin. I think it's the 7th year anniversary of my first fight that they attended, and I think Scott basically just bet on the guy who had the most tattoos in each fight. Because they were, trying to pick fights on the undercard or whatever, just gambling, trying to keep it interesting while they're waiting for me to fight. Of course, my opponent was far more tatted up than me, but I don't think he landed a punch in that fight.
Not worked well for him. Daniel, talking about some poker. What you were on Facebook Live playing Friday Night Poker? Is that right?
So I got actually a busy week when it comes to poker this week. Tuesday and Wednesday, which is tomorrow. I don't know whenever you're listening to this. I'll be on Poker After Dark, which is on Poker Go. To watch that, you have to have a subscription, whether it's monthly or yearly. If you do want to save $10 on a yearly and you don't have one, you can use a promo code Daniel and you'll save $10 on that. Also, Friday, this is a new show. We got Amanda Leatherman back in the fold for what's called Friday Night Poker, and this is kind of like a cool
you got
angle.
Amanda back from what is she? She made like a news anchor or something. Give the people an update on what Amanda, because that's not a name that most people in the poker world have heard for the last 6-7 years.
I heard Amanda was like hosting like Montana afternoons or something, and some.
No. I'll give you the scoop. I don't know where you get this shit. She was actually Amanda was in North Carolina. She started on a morning talk show radio, which was like the lowest rated show in the whole state or whatever. She was there 6 to 8 months, and she's great at what she does. She's so personable. She fits into everywhere. It ended up becoming the #1 rated show. She's no longer doing the show. Maybe we'll have her on here like next week or something, because she's doing a lot of good things. She's the new host, along with Jeff Platt and Brett Hanks, on Friday Night Poker. And Friday Night Poker, for those of you that haven't watched it, you can watch this for free on Facebook Live, and you can interact, and they talk to you. Like Amanda's in the chat, Brent's in the chat. It's very like interactive in that sense. And the stakes are really small. It's like a 5-5-10 game or something. And they'll have guys like Bryn Kenny and Antonio and Jeff Gross and like a lot of really fun people who are truly splashing around. Like hand one, you see 4 guys all in on a flop kind of stuff. Like really gambling, totally free, as I said. I think it's like called Stadium Poker or Watch Stadium Poker or something like that. But if you check my Twitter and stuff, I'll be promoting the show because I'll be on it this week, looking to have some fun. Amanda, again, she's not there with Brent and Jeff Platt to like talk about the depth strategy of the Ace Queen. More so, keeping it fun, keeping it light. It's about a 4-hour show, just added to the new Poker Go resume. But this is unique in that it's getting out to a wider audience because it's free for one, and it's available like all over Facebook platforms. And I think it's pretty cool. Like, just being able to be in the chat while the show is going. And sometimes the players at the table, like Frank Casella and Jeff Gross, they were like involved in the chat as they were playing. And I think that's kind of like a really new angle to try to like think outside the box in terms of how can we make TV poker fun and interactive? Like obviously there's things like Twitch, which already exist. But something is produced and high end as this and the way that it's handled. I think it's going to be fun. And again, like, so Tuesday, Wednesday, we're going to be playing 200, 400 blinds. Or 1 and 200 with a 200, 400 straddle, so that's pretty hefty. I'll have to try to play relatively well. And then Friday, probably get shit-faced, drink shots, and just play like just terrible. Yeah, that's the plan. One other thing, too, I wanted to add that I haven't is like I've been spending the last few days going over like hundreds and hundreds of videos of submissions for my Platinum Pass giveaway. All the team pros were given a chance to give away a Platinum Pass. Mine was, I wanted to know, who do you play for? So essentially create a 2-minute video. Let me know in that 2 minutes a little bit about you, who you want to play for, because I'm going to give you this pass with the condition that at least 50% of it you're going to donate to the charity of your choice. So we narrowed it down. I'll be releasing the YouTube video of the final 5. And I swear to you, this was like legitimately difficult. Like there's several, ones I didn't choose, and I still don't really have a clear picture of like which one I'm going to pick. Whether it was like somebody playing for a dog shelter, for mental health, for human trafficking. There's just a wide range of people that also, there's really, really like a great promotion. I love the idea of being able to give these people a chance to make some money for something they care about. So it's giving to these people so that they have the experience of giving. And so that should all be released this week too. So yeah, like busy week for me. Normally I just do fuck all and watch hockey, but this week I'm busy.
Was there like somebody who wanted to donate it to the Human Fund, or was there some ones that you just automatically dismissed?
Well, here's the thing about these videos, and I'll give you like a little tip if you are going to, ever be in one of these promotions in the future. If you don't grab the person, if you're doing a 2-minute video and you don't grab them in the first 15 seconds, the odds of them getting through the 2 minutes are very slim. Like, yeah. I'm not going to lie. There were several videos that after like 25 seconds, I'm like, okay, I'm not picking this person. Nothing wrong with the people. I'm just like, this isn't the winner, right? So you really have to front end it with whatever you got. That's your big shebang in the video. Make sure you put that in the beginning part to really grab attention. Personality doesn't hurt. Also, generally speaking, like reading off reading off a piece of paper doesn't usually translate to authenticity well. Like I get you want to get all the information out there and you want it to be like polished, but like I'd rather see the raw like emotional connection you have to this and just speak off the cuff. That really is what speaks to me more than kind of reading off a teleprompter.
And there's another guy that I saw, it was something, Twitch streamer for Run It Up, who's got a 13, it's a Canadian kid, I think. He's got a 13 challenge thing too.
Oh, Arlie Shaban, yeah. The 12 labors of Arlie Shaban. Speaking of Run It Up, I don't know if we can drop the new, I guess we can. I just saw today, Andrew Nemi, newest member of Team Run It Up, who's doing a great job building that stable. Pretty cool for them. Arlie Shaban is like this guy who's 29 years old. He's a streamer, and he loves poker, dude. Like, when you first started and you just had that, like, giddy-eyed, like, oh, my God, I love this. He's there. So we did a video, which you can probably find somewhere online, where, like, I went over some hands with him, broke down some situations, some things he's doing, and, like, trying to fix his game a little bit. And what I was able to, announce at the end is we've got, like, sort of 12 labors for Arlie to complete. And if he completes all 12 by the end of the year, PokerStars is going to award him with a platinum pass. So, like, when he gave him the news, just his reaction is, like, epic, man. He is, like, exactly what poker should be about, which is a guy who absolutely loves it.
Nice. I had an interesting situation pop up this week. Terrence, you'll remember this. With the Vancouver Canucks, what they do at their home opener every year is any of the unclaimed 50-50s from last season get added to the 50-50 pot for the first game or the first regular season game of this season. So typically, the opening night is full of a bunch of sicko gamblers because they all know the 50-50 prize is going to be $250,000. But so I took my daughter to the game. She's 15, and I started having a discussion with her. She's really good, smart at math. She's in like grade 11 math as a grade 10 kid, proud father, whatever. But anyways, I'm explaining EV to her, and she's kind of getting it. And we get to the game, and I put up on Facebook. I said, hey, anybody that wants me to buy tickets for them, I'm at the game, shoot me a text. And I start getting tons and tons of my buddies texting me, hey, buy me tickets. So we go up, buy the tickets, and it becomes interesting because the jackpot gets to about 250,000, and typically they're about 40,000. So what happens is that if it's a $40,000 jackpot for a specific evening, that means there's 80,000 in the 50-50 pool. 50% goes to this fantastic charity, the Canucks for Kids charity, helping kids with cancer and their families get the medical treatment that they need. So it's a great, great cause. And so it gets up to about 250 grand, and there's tons of tickets being sold. And Terrence and I are having sort of a discussion about he's buying a bunch online, I'm buying some, and we're trying to figure out how we can do a save and everything. And we get into the Kelly criterion, right, T?
Yeah. So, I mean, I sort of thought so I ended up buying $500 worth of tickets online. You were like, I might only buy 100. And I was like, well, and I was like, oh, how come? Just because like the variance is high, which it is obviously. Like anytime you have a very small chance of winning a very large prize, that's like necessarily higher variance. And you were just like, yeah, bankroll management, exactly. And I was like, he's like, and you actually mentioned the Kelly criterion, and what I said was, well, Kelly's actually like super aggressive in situations where you have a fairly big advantage. If you've ever kind of just Googled Kelly calculator and plugged it in, like I remember when we were talking about the Mayweather-McGregor fight, I think the line was like 3-1 essentially. And I thought Mayweather had something like a 95% chance of winning conservatively. I mean, it might have realistically been like 98 or something like that, but I put in 95 and it was like, you should bet your house and everything that you have. And I was like, no, I'm just kind of I'm a little less aggressive than that. And in general, like, yeah, like anytime you sort of see promotions and stuff like that, like Kelly is like really aggressive. But I actually plugged it in, and it turns out you were right. For something like $100,000 gambling bankroll, $100 was actually almost exactly the correct bet, I guess, because it was such a long shot. So for stupid
people, for like really, really stupid people, what is exactly the Kelly criterion?
Okay, yeah, that's good that you forced me to take a step back. Basically, the Kelly criterion says that for a given edge, how much should you bet to maximize your bankroll over time, to grow your bankroll as quickly as possible. And the idea sort of is, if you bet too much and your edge is not small, your edge is too small, you will stand a larger than average chance of going broke, right? So even if you are getting it good, if you have $50,000 to your name you still shouldn't play the main event of the World Series of Poker, even if that is your highest EV event. Even if you're the best poker player in the world, you probably shouldn't play the main event of the World Series of Poker. If you have $50,000, you're probably much better off playing 5-5-10 against a bunch of people who are splashing around on a televised stream. That's essentially what the Kelly criterion said. So Adam's intuition was absolutely correct. It turns out, of course, we were all suckers, and Adam, let us know why.
Yeah. Okay. So, it's sort of an interesting situation because what happens is, because this money was unclaimed from last year, it had already.
Which is I'm sorry to interrupt, but which is by itself crazy. Imagine like entering a lotto and then winning and not claiming your ticket. And this apparently happens 2 or 3 times out of only 42 home games or 41 home games in a season.
Yeah, I think it was 4 this year. So there was 4 prizes from
10% of people who win the lottery.
Yeah,
don't claim their ticket.
So anyway. It's carried over. Now, remember, that money has already been raked 50%, right? They've already taken 50%, given it to the charity. Nobody claimed it. So they add it to the prize pool for the first night's game for the 50-50. So they run the prize pool up. It gets up to about $250,000. So I'm thinking, there's probably $150,000 in there that's not going to be raked again, plus another, 50. It's going to be about $200,000 for the winner tonight. And it ends up being, they run it, the jackpot gets to $250,000, and they end up giving away $125,000. So they raked it and then raked it again, which, more rake is better, right, Daniel, obviously?
No fucking comment.
I was going to say, we should be more mad. The only reason that I'm for sure we're not more mad is, as you said, Canucks for Kids is actually like a really solid charity that I don't mind getting it in bad against. But next year, might not spend $500 on the tickets. But yeah, we've been doing that. I mean, I've been doing it as long as I figured out that there was essentially an overlay on game 1 of the season every year.
How about we add, I will give a comment, okay? More rake is better for kids with cancer, for fuck's sakes.
Yeah.
For kids with cancer, yes, it is better.
Take it all. Please take it all.
Take it all.
It's good. Anyway, all right. One more thing. Ross, so back in our old show at 2+2, we would have a forum where a bunch of our listeners would come and post questions, interact. We'd have football pools and all kinds of fun stuff that we'd all do together. That is no longer the case. So Ross has set up a subreddit for this podcast. It's reddit.com/r/DAT Poker Podcast.
DAT Poker Pod.
DAT Poker Pod.
DAT Poker Pod. Sorry, not DAT Poker Podcast. DAT Poker Pod.
But yeah, a lot of people use Reddit. You should come join us. Subscribe to the thing. If anybody is listening to this who is a moderator of our poker, which I know is a very active forum, maybe you could get us connected on the sidebar there. And I also need some more moderators, so send me your submissions. You should be able to find my info on the sidebar there.
Another good thing about Reddit is you don't actually have to sign up for an email and give anybody your information at all. You can just create fake accounts till the cows come home.
That's true. Yeah. So get in there. Let's make that active. It was fun. That's the one thing we miss is the forum from the old show.
Yeah, I loved interacting with people. Absolutely.
All right, jump on over to Reddit, DAT Poker Pod, and get registered. All right, let's get on some news.
What in the world is going on?
Fake, disgusting news.
I want to start off, guys, by bringing in something to your attention. Geralabos Figueres, who is, of course, one of the legendary sports betting figures in the sports betting basketball specialty field, has taken a job with the Dallas Mavericks. He is now their director of quantitative research and development. Bob, he's obviously in Mark Cuban's grid now, has been at the forefront of modeling basketball for the purposes of gambling for a long time. His ultimate goal, and he said it all along, anytime you listen to Bob doing podcasts, that's his nickname is Bob, I think he said he wants to be the GM of a team. And it's troublesome for him because he's always been known as this professional basketball gambler, And that doesn't exactly jive with being a general manager of a team. He's a very smart guy. He understands the game to a level that few do, and advanced stats and different theories on how to maximize each possession in a basketball tournament. But it's hard for him, and it was hard for him because as being known as the professional gambler, he's going to have a really hard time becoming an assistant GM or a GM or a high up position because of the negative look that being a gambler does. So he separated himself from gambling for the last couple of years. I don't think he's done it for a while. And he's really focused on becoming in management in basketball. So that's really cool to see.
Well, and I think in addition to the gambling aspect of it, I mean, professional sports is well known as being a good old boy club. And, and Haralabos was not a former NBA player. He was not a coach, in a college or somewhere. Like, he wasn't a basketball guy. And in the sort of in crowd, and that probably itself makes it harder.
Yeah, I think when you see the evolution of sports, it's not just basketball, but you look at like the Toronto Maple Leafs. They have a kid named Kyle Dubas. This isn't a guy who had an illustrious NHL career, but I think more people are waking up to the fact that just because you were a great player, that's not like a qualifier for whether or not you would make a good GM.
Right.
Studying data, analytics.
It's changing for sure. Yeah.
Sure, and obviously somebody like Bob who has studied the depth of analytics in terms of like rating a player, a specific player in a team who may put up good stats to the layman's eye, but he sees things underneath it where the guy's just like a completely awful player from a team chemistry perspective or whatever else. So it's good to see. Like, I mean, it's unfortunate. Like, I don't even watch NFL. Like, it's laughable, I think, at this point where like coaches are so afraid to make the right decision because they might look like asshats. And it's true. And like, I even put up a poll about hockey. Like, people are afraid to pull the goalie too early, even though there's been some research that says they should be, because when you make that decision and it goes against you, people start to question you. If you just go by the status quo, nobody says anything. So Mark Cuban is exactly the right guy to pull in a Haralabos because he's very like forward thinking, and he breaks the mold of what a NBA owner looks like. That's for sure.
Advanced hockey stats is the worst. It's so hard to get people past did you play the game? I played the game. You don't know what you're talking about. The eye test, right? They all believe in the eye test. Oh, that kid looks good. It's so frustrating because there's so many great stats available in a sport like hockey.
Yeah,
now.
I mean, you can combine them, right? Like the real best scouts and the people that really know what they're doing is they use these advanced stats. They still use their eye test where they're like, okay, they're watching this player, they're watching this, but then you can like actually accumulate all the data and notice, okay, this guy's Corsi, which is a rating that defines essentially whether you're like kind of a positive or negative player. His Corsi's like 40%. So what's going on here? So even though like when you can combine the two, maybe you see some potential in a player because sometimes the players you're playing with affects your numbers. So if you're Erik Karlsson, who was in Ottawa, which is an awful team, he's like minus 30 last year because the team sucks, right? Now he's going to move to San Jose, and obviously he's not becoming just a better player. He's just going to be, have better stats and peripherals because of the fact that he's supported by other players. So like, it is a science that you want to combine the eye test with analytics. And if you avoid analytics and live by like old school mentality, you're just not going to succeed in any sports these days.
I mean, there are still people in poker who think that, when you use math, they're pretty much dinosaurs at this point, but there are people who think that in poker, if you use math, you're taking away from the true nature of the game and this and that. I mean, this was still prevalent all the way through like the 2000s that
people in general are really afraid of me.
Well, I mean, Phil Hellmuth has a study group. His study group is hashtag Cantu Matiso study group. Right? Like, I don't know that any of these people even know what a solver is. I spoke to Phil Hellmuth a few weeks ago, or like about a year ago. I explained to him what GTO is. He said, I invented it. I'm like, what the fuck? Then he said, I got a lesson in GTO. 2 days. Now he knows it all. And this is what he said. It's so great because he's like, I learned GTO so I could learn how to exploit people. It's just like an oxymoron, right? Because it's like, yeah, the whole point of GTO is you can't exploit that. It is, you guys know.
Wait, does he think is he seriously saying he invented GTO?
So he was offended because I called him an exploitative type player, which I was like, I am too, Phil. That's like where my edge is. He's like, no. And then I said game theory. He's like, I'm game theory optimal. Like, Phil, I promise you, Phil, you're not game theory optimal. And he was like just genuinely offended because he thought I was insulting him. Where in that case, I have insulted him many times. But in this specific case, I was not actually insulting him. I was just telling the truth. But then it's great because he came back to me and said, no, yeah, I first of all, he invented it. Then he had like a 2-day, maybe Brandon Cantu showed him some simulations and he's like, oh my God, I got it all figured out now.
That's so awesome. You mentioned football, Daniel. Last night on Sunday Night Football, there was this situation. It's overtime. The Cowboys have the ball in a tie game. There's 5 minutes left, I think, and it's 4th and 1 on the other team's 40. And Jason Garrett, the coach of the Cowboys,
the clapper.
He punts. The other team comes the other way, kicks the field goal, and wins. And you just I get frustrated every year, and I know people get sick of hearing about this, but I just don't get it. I don't get how a league the size and the value of the NFL has no clue about expected value or win percentage or game theory or anything, and they can just sit there and kick games away all the time.
And this one's a really easy one to isolate too. Just say that, like, hey, if you punt the ball in this situation, your percentage chance of winning is X, and if you go for it on 4th and round 1, the percentage is Y. Y is bigger than X. Like that's an easy one. What Daniel was talking about earlier with doing advanced stats, like what's the value of this player in a team sport? Like what's imagine like in NFL football, like trying to figure out what is the value of your right tackle. Like that's such a hard thing to quantify properly, but like this is an easy one. Like this is just like a layup. This is like, should I double down on 11 versus a 6? Oh, you know what? I'll just hit. Like, why not? Like it's mind blowing.
Yeah, I mean, like just because since we're all Canadian, I was going to use a hockey analogy in that, like, so for example, if you're going into the third period, right? The goal of a hockey game is to get either 1 point or 2 points. If you lose 4-0 or you lose 8-0, it literally gives you the exact same expected value in terms of your season. So if you're down 4-0 with 20 minutes to go in the game, why do you bother having a goalie in that, right? People are like, oh, sometimes teams come back from 4-0. That's true. That is absolutely true. They do come back. But guess what? Overall, they're going to come back more often when they have the 6th attacker. Yes, they're going to get scored on more often because they have an empty net, and it's easier to do that. But they're increasing variance and making it, increasing the fluctuation, increasing variance, which actually is going to have them win. They're not going to win very often anyways. It's a very, very small amount. But so many people are resisting this idea. They're like, oh, no, you want to give the boys a chance. I'm like, we are giving the boys a chance. We're giving them a better chance to put up a couple goals. Maybe if you put up 2 quick goals, now you put the goalie back in. Or maybe you don't. I don't know. But, if any coach were to do that, they'd be so ostracized because they're doing something that's actually likely correct, but it just looks silly. Right? Like, I mean,
the opposite of it. Well, at the end of the season, like they have this really skewed goal differential, right? Like they could be a team that qualifies for the playoffs, but they're like -40 in goal differential because, like you said, they lose a bunch of games 8-0 because of it. That's going to happen. And also people will trot out any reason to rationalize something that's mathematically irrational too. They'll just say, oh, well, you can't pull the goalie down 4-0 because then they'll lose 7-0, and the team's morale will be hurt.
Yeah, but it'll be easier for the other team to score. I'm like, yeah, we get that, but it's also going to be, by definition, easier for us to score because we have an extra attacker. There was, I think, last year in the NHL something to the effect of 154 goals scored with when a team pulled their goalie. They scored 154 times. So someone posts back the stat. He's like, yeah, but you know what? The other team scored like 400 times. Who cares what the other team did? The other team was already winning. That didn't change the scope of the game. The fact that 154 times, we saw it in the Toronto-Chicago game last night, where they pulled a goalie and then they were able to tie it up. It's just mind-boggling that people that make these decisions ultimately, and I think someone like a Haralabos in the NBA is going to really help with that in terms of like, what is the proper way to play when you're down by a lot and basically going for it.
I mean, ultimately, this is why poker is great. And this is why I think, all three, I mean, really at some point, Ross has been kind of a professional poker player too. All four of us, in a sense, have chosen poker because there are consequences for your action. Just because like if you have a hypothesis, you're willing to gamble about this. And this is my thing, or Adam's thing is NFL coaching. Mine is like, if you have a hypothesis and are you willing to bet on it? Otherwise, it doesn't matter, because this coach that Adam references, he's probably making $10 million a year, regardless of how many stupid decisions. CEOs of major corporations make incredibly idiotic decisions, one after another after another, and it never comes to bear because it's not necessarily reflected in the stock price. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But there's so many variables that go into it. Like, if I don't know anything about football, so if the Cowboys end up having a really good season, like, this coach will probably still get paid even more money because of that. But poker's so much more fair, because if you consistently make these sort of punting on 4th and 1 on the opponent's 40 decision, or if you consistently make this, I'm not going to pull the goalie down 2 goals until there's 45 seconds left in the game. If you make these decisions in hockey or in football or in so many aspects of the real world, you're just not punished. But in poker, you are. If you're just a nit and you're just like, oh, whatever, like, oh, I don't know what to do, I should probably just fold. Like, you will lose money, you will go broke, you will have to go drive Kanish's truck. Like, that's what I still love about poker.
So I was venting about it on Twitter, and somebody responded, and it was perfect. It's a guy named Brian Fons, at BR Fons. He says, it's a simple lack of identifying the goals of the decision maker. The coach doesn't want to be the one to lose the game. The owner doesn't want to be embarrassed. We as fans have to understand that the goal isn't to win games. Sorry. It's so true, right? Like, that coach.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing how so many of these fans are like sheep. Like, oh, we don't want our boys getting blown out like 7-0. Like, what do you care? The points are, you're either getting, in a hockey game, you're either getting 2 points for a win, 1 for an overtime loss, or 0. You get 0 if it's 8-0 or 4. But, like, there's this whole, like, I guess, resistance to any sort of, like, changes that make logical sense. And people just, like, I mean, because when I talked about the pulling your net early, and it was based off of a piece I read in The Athletic, which showed sort of some math behind, they should be pulling the goalies way earlier. People just go crazy over stuff like this because, they're used to what they're used to, and they're not willing to, like, I mean, this is why part of, like, Tiger Town said he loves about poker, and part of why poker still is profitable, because people like, oh yeah, like, you could show somebody, like, you should be going all in here with 9-deuce offsuit, and it's correct, but they're like, oh, I'm not getting in there with crap cards like that. I'm like, okay, it's definitely the right play, and I know you might look stupid, but it's right.
Yeah. One thing about pulling the goalie early is it would, as a guy who loves to bet the under, that would make me want to commit suicide.
But the line will correct. I mean, if one team starts doing it, that you'll know that the line will correct. Like, it's not going to be 4.5 goals when that team's playing.
Remember, the Colorado Avalanche did it for about 3 or 4 years ago, and Patrick Waugh was the head coach. He'd pull it 10, 11 minutes to go, down 2 goals, he'd pull the goalie, and people got furious with him.
And he's correct. Like, the piece basically said, if you're down 1 goal, you should pull the goalie with 5:40 left. If you're down by 2, you should pull the goalie with 17 minutes left. And if you're down by 3, you should start the third period with an empty net. Now, there's a caveat to that, of course. If there's a face-off in your own zone, you can obviously bring the goalie back in, right? You don't have to just, like, leave him out the whole time. And obviously, if a goal is scored, you can adjust and, maybe put him back in the net. But that's based on the mathematics they did. Now, of course, it's hard to say that this study is absolutely applicable, but it seems to make a lot of, like, intuitive sense that, they should be taking these risks earlier in games.
Will the Golden Knights be the first team to ever start the third period with a pulled goalie because of your influence?
I wish, right? Like, I mean, I wonder who's the first team that's going to start the third period with an empty net. Like, I wonder, like, which coach is going to have the guts to do that, and what will happen first? Will that coach happen, or will a female coach be even an assistant in the NHL? Which will happen first? I don't know.
I got female coach first. I can't see it.
I do too. Yeah.
But if for anybody who's interested in football, there's a thing on YouTube about, and it's 10 or 15 minute documentary on a small college team, and a coach who doesn't believe in punting, and he does not even have a punter.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah.
It's 4th and 20 on his own 1 yard line. He goes for it. It's fantastic to watch if anybody's interested in that kind of stuff.
Is that like I think it's SB Nation?
I can't remember what it was, but it's easy to find. If you want to search on YouTube. All right, let's move on. I mentioned we are sponsored by Daniel Negreanu's Masterclass of Poker. Daniel, I wanted to talk to you. I looked over the table of contents, and I saw chapter 13, and it caught my eye because it's about overbetting, and the description is overbetting, learning the ideal conditions for using an overbet, how to price it, and how to use this advanced tactic as part of your winning strategy. And when I read that, the first thing I think back to was Prahlad Freeman, Spirit Rock online back in the day, where he was ruling the roost at some of the UB and some of the other sites. he was, from my recollection, I remember him as being the first guy to really use the overbet in a powerful way, and wanted you to just give us a quick take on what people can expect to hear you talk about when they do sign up for the masterclass.
Yeah, so that's a great question. We'll talk specifically about overbetting and what it actually is designed to do. And it's essentially designed to manipulate folding frequencies of your opponent, right? So obviously, if there's $100 in the pot and you bet 300, right, your opponent should be folding a very high percentage of his hands, right? Now, you can exploit that with a player who is calling if a player is too often calling with top pair in a spot like this, they're probably not calling correctly long term. So you can overbet, you can sort of adjust and from a game theory optimal perspective and exploit by overbetting more strong. You can also, in certain situations, depending on board texture or whatever, when you use the overbet in spots where your opponent likely has a part of his range where he's going to call 2/3 pot, but probably doesn't have the correct calling hand for, a 3x pot. So the great thing about this is, even if he does call you, he's making a theoretical mistake unless he's adjusting. If he's not playing exploitatively, he's making a game theory mistake. If you bet 3x pot and he calls with a hand that isn't supposed to in that range, that's something you can take note of, and now you can sort of punish him later by using the overbet. So the overbet is essentially, as I said, in the most layman way to explain it is, it manipulates the correct frequency for your opponent. So one of the things we talk about in the masterclass is how to calculate your folding frequency, and it's quite simple, really. It's essentially a very simple formula where it's the bet divided by the pot plus the bet, and that should be your folding frequency. So if there's 100 in the pot and the bet is 100, that's 1 over 1 plus 1, which is 2. So your folding frequency from a game theory perspective should be 50% in this case, right? Now, you should be folding 50% of the time. Now, if the person bets 3x pot, now you're talking about, 3 divided by 4. So that person should be folding 75% of the time to a 3x pot bet. So again, now you can sort of play the game at a higher level when you start to gauge where do you think your opponent is in their range. Are they in the high part of the range based on how they played it, or the lower part? And use that. I think for me personally, I think overbetting is one of the best ways to incorporate exploitative play once you have a really good understanding of your opponents. But it's very rare where it's correct. This doesn't mean you should just always be overbetting, because the conditions have to be really, really specific. And it's usually an inferior bet size to a 2/3 or 1/4 pot bet or something like that. But there are situations where you want to manipulate your opponent's bet size exploitatively, that the overbet really is a powerful tool.
Daniel, I think it's intuitive, I think, to most people to understand how you can use an overbet to exploit someone who calls too much, because I think that's sort of the person that we encounter most frequently, is some guy who just calls too much. I mean, I think, especially if you tend to play in against more recreational opponents, you encounter these guys all the time. Could you talk a little bit, obviously, want to sell a course, and I'm sure this is all in there, but talk about the situations, the opposite situation. What are the situations where you might want to bet 3x pot as a bluff, and that wouldn't necessarily work when you're betting 3/4 pot? So for example, I think of a spot, when I'm playing, and usually if it's online or whether it's live, I just think, well, this is a spot I definitely should bluff, and I'm correct to bluff, but how would I know whether it's correct to bluff 2/3 pot, 3/4 pot, full pot, or just, stick it all in there?
Well, that's a very, very good question. And I think this is where you would combine a combination of overbetting and manipulating their folding frequencies with blockers. And essentially what that means is, what extra information do you have that would make your bluff more successful? So the most obvious way to describe a blocker is, 3 spades are out on the board. The board is like king, 9, 4, 3 deuce. With 3 spades, you've played the hand aggressively. You have the ace of spades with not another spade. And now you bet 3x pot on the river against the thinking player, right? So a big portion of their top 25% of their range is going to be the nut flush, right? If the king is the spade, now they have to have theoretically, maybe a queen high flush or a jack high flush or something in that neighborhood, something super strong to call you here. Whereas if you had bet in the same spot with the ace of spades, just 2/3 pot, they're going to call you with all flushes, which they should. They're going to call you very often with just top pair. But if that player, if that player, you bet 3x pot on that river, and that player just shows you top pair, and you were bluffing with ace of spades, he's just made a huge mathematical mistake, even though he was right. Now, obviously, physical tells play a role. Poker isn't just robotic. But once you see a player call with a hand that low in their range that got to the river for a 3x pot size bet, you now know you can use that exploitatively against this player in the future because they made a very exploitative call here where they should have folded. So the one thing you want to focus on when you are going to use it as a bluff is you have to be up against thinking players who are thinking in terms of, okay, not just like, am I good or not, but where am I in my range right now? Like, am I at the top of my range or the bottom? Or the middle. And a 3x pot should fold out the middle and bottom parts of your opponent's range. And because you have the ace of spades, you've just cut out a whole bunch of the top part of his range, right? So what's left? A much weaker looking range. So that would be a spot where you would combine, the overbet manipulation with a blocker that has information that lets you know his range is capped in a very significant way.
And then after, when the guy's stacking all your chips, you tell him how bad you played. I think that's
exactly. You just let him know, like, you might have called him, but I won the war. You won the battle. I won the war.
You shouldn't have called.
Yes, you should not have folded with his hand.
Masterclass.com for Daniel Nguyen's masterclass. We're going to talk a little bit about that each week and highlight some of the things that you can learn by signing up for that course. Not only Daniel Nguyen's masterclass on poker, but there's I want to say 30-odd world leaders in their field who are going to tell you how to do the things that they're very, very good at doing. So head on over there, check it out, and get signed up today. Moving on, I want to talk about the Partypoker Live situation. They just had, and this is part. And by the way, I want to say before we start talking about this stuff, I think it's really, really important and healthy for the poker ecosystem that there's more than one dominant brand, both in online poker and in live tournaments. And Partypoker coming along, having a resurgence for their online site as well as the tournaments has been really, really good for poker. But there's some stuff happening that I want to just question and ask if this is the right thing to do. So there was an event in England at the Dusk Till Dawn, and these things have all been insanely popular. And Partypoker has been really, really aggressive with the guarantees they've been putting on these tournaments. I think to the ones in Montreal and wondering how they were going to get to the guarantees that they offer. But basically what's happening and what seems to be happening, there's reports that the Partypoker Live team, when they realize that a guarantee isn't going to get hit, are taking people and putting them in the tournament because essentially, the company is going to lose that money if they don't hit the guarantee. It's just going to go to the prize pool anyway. They might as well, I guess this is their thinking, they might as well get a player in there and the player can play for 40% or whatever they decide is appropriate. So that I understand and I agree with the fact that these high guarantees are really, really good for tournament poker. However, if the Partypoker Live has a vested interest in the outcome of these events, you can see how this can become problematic really quickly.
Yeah, for me,
Go ahead, Dan.
For me, I think just the transparency of letting people know first and foremost that this is what's happening when the guarantees is like a big step towards, it being kind of okay. Like ultimately, live event, it's very different than online. Now, if this is happening online, so for example, if there's a guarantee, for an online event, and then right before the guarantee hits, they're staking a whole bunch of people, that's essentially like having employees where you have a vested interest in the outcome of a tournament that you are actually running, right? And I don't know, that doesn't necessarily means that any sort of elite, cheating would go on, but players that are buying into an event not knowing that they're so for example, I believe that it's true for both Partypoker and Stars, that I know it is for Stars, that people that work for PokerStars cannot play on PokerStars. They're not allowed. They can play on other sites if they like to. They're not allowed to play on PokerStars. So if you are staking a bunch of people on your online site to be playing to just meet those guarantees, and that's not public knowledge in terms of what the numbers actually look like, that's a place where I think it's a lot more questionable than with live events. Either way, I think it's something that it matters who's paying for this, right? Is this just some guy who has interest in, is this, I don't know, to me it matters who's paying for it. If it's just some guy who's doing it out of the kindness of his heart, that's one thing. But if it's actually coming from company funds to put in people online to hit guarantees somewhat falsely, if you will, I don't know. Online, I think it's a big problem. Live, I'm I guess you could convince me either way.
Yeah, I mean, I'd take a stronger position on this. I mean, if it is a company, I think the optics of this are terrible. I mean, you can definitely come up with a situation where there's a ruling that could be kind of 50-50 either way, and it's involving the staked player and some guy who's, backed by someone else or has his own money in there. And yeah, like you can put in safeguards like that, but I think the optics are terrible. And just the fact that, it devalues their guarantee completely if you're just going to filter in, a bunch of people and water down essentially the guarantee at the last minute. It's whether or not it's grossly unethical. I mean, I don't know if it's grossly unethical, but if nothing else, it creates a situation where it's probably just not even good business sense.
Yeah, and I would guess, and I don't know, right? So this is just my speculation. I would guess people that are being staked in these events are not going to be typically like just random recreational players. They're likely pros who maybe play cash and are just kind of waiting for the call, or that are semi-professional. So that also bites into people's equity when you have more like last-minute professionals, being staked by the operator of the event. Overall, I agree with you. Obviously. It's a very fine line for me to walk, obviously being represented by Poker Stars. I'm not here to be, trash party poker in any way, shape or form. But like, I do think in a case like this, there has been rumblings about this for quite a while, that it would be best for them and for the poker community as a whole to just kind of come clean and be like, this is what we do, and like share the practices so that everyone who buys into the event knows that, okay, we have a $2 million guarantee, but if it's a little short, we're going to stake about 200 people and give them 30% free roll. Like,
I wouldn't even do it that. I mean, if it were me, I wouldn't even do it that way. Like, why even do this where you have a potential conflict of interest? All you really need to do is sort of the night before the event, you run satellites with overlays, right? You can just be like, okay, we're running, let's say it's a $10,000 buy-in event. We're going to run, a $1,000 satellite and give away seats for every 8 people that enter. Okay. Like, boom, anybody can do the math and be like, oh, okay, well, that's an overlay. And just, you're going to get extra seats in that way. And it looks so much less bad than actually staking, like you say, like whether it's pros or random casino whales into the event. It's just, it's not the best way to do it.
I think the problem with your idea, and I don't know if this is the case, but like sometimes you're going to hit the guarantee anyway without the satellites, and you don't know until the tournament starts, and you're deep into late registration. So doing it the night before, it'll increase the chances that you hit the guarantee, but sometimes you've just wasted a bunch of money by putting these overlays in a satellite that would have never you didn't need to, if you will.
Yeah, and I think the reply would probably be something like, well, if we don't do this, then these guarantees are going to get much, much smaller, and that's bad for the recreational player that plans his schedule around big tournaments. So in this instance, we end up getting the prize pool up to where we
but pretending like there's an overlay when there isn't one isn't bad for the recreational player. I mean, you're just pulling the wool over their eyes.
Sorry, I don't know.
And the bottom line is like this. I think it just comes down to like really breaking down, like being responsible and understanding like what is a reasonable guarantee that we're going to hit. Like you want to stretch and you want to like push the envelope, but like, if you know that you're probably going to be able to hit a 1.5 million guarantee, don't say 3 million, right? Just say 1.5. I don't think there's a big cross section of players that look at an event and go, oh, it's a 1.5 million guarantee, not playing. 3 million, I am playing. So in this case, and I know like you guys know some people that have worked for PokerStars for years for the online events, that when there are guarantees on there, they do a pretty in-depth analysis of like, making sure that they're likely to hit this guarantee so that everyone knows it's going to be a good event, but it also doesn't cost the company money and they don't hemorrhage, because when that happens, and as you said, like the guarantees start to drop and then the company stops doing that because they just can't afford it in the end.
Yeah, indeed. Another thing about Party this week that came out, and it was at 2+2 in the MTT community forum. There's a thread in there for Party Poker discussion, and somebody asked sort of an interesting question. Hey, do you guys segregate your funds from the players' funds from the operational funds? And the answer was because there's a Party Poker rep that comes in and answers questions for people, and this person answered no right away. And everybody's like, wait, this is what? You don't segregate your funds? And it turned out there was a little bit of an uproar. The rep came back and clarified and said, wait a second, sorry, I misunderstood your question. We do segregate the funds. And then they quoted their terms and conditions are surrounding this sort of experience. And in the terms and conditions, it says, customer funds are kept in accounts separate from business accounts, but they would form part of the assets of the business in an event of insolvency. So basically, if the site goes tits up, it's going to be because we don't have enough money to fulfill our obligations. And when that happens, player funds go into a big fund to pay off anybody who's left as a creditor, which completely, for me, defeats the purposes of having funds segregated. I mean, that's why you do it.
That's incredibly dangerous based on what we know of history with Full Tilt Poker, who's had similar practices where they did not segregate. Now, not to this extent, but the way this is worded, and I'm not a lawyer, but to hear it, it says the assets of the business in the event of so basically, if they go broke, all the players' money is used as part of them sort of dispersing, and there's no guarantee that the players' money goes back to players. That's a little, I don't know, again, I'm not a lawyer. Maybe we should have somebody look at that, but that's a little, scary to me, because I know for sure, and again, I'm a PokerStars guy, one of the things that had them survive Black Friday was the fact that they never used any of their budget or any of the players' funds for marketing. And it reminds me of the days when Full Tilt and PokerStars were going back and forth. There was a point where Full Tilt was spending a shit ton of marketing money. When we found out how much they were spending on Poker After Dark, internally people were like, how can they afford that? Right? Because we can't afford that and we're a much bigger company. So we ultimately found out how they could afford that. They were, being very aggressive and using player funds in their marketing budget. So I think Ray Batar and Full Tilt at the time, they had a real addiction to wanting to be bigger than PokerStars. It was a really big thing, but they just weren't there yet. They didn't have the foundation, the base, the player pool, the financial, regulation, security and stuff like that. So ultimately they fell. And I don't know again enough about lawyer speak, but I would, I don't know. I think it's important for me as a player, think that player security is first and foremost, knowing that my money's safe and that if the company goes belly up, that it's separate from whatever they have to pay other people is kind of important to me.
Yeah, lawyer speak / accountant speak / finance speak. There's a lot of tie-ins here, and if any of our listeners out there are experts on sort of bankruptcy law in the UK or in Gibraltar or whatever, feel free to chime in. I guess it's worth noting that the thread Adam quoted, it's still kind of an ongoing thread, and the Partypoker rep did say kind of in her last post that she was, going to go check with her people essentially and make sure that the response is accurate, and that the relevant team make sure the info on site is updated and recent. So there's a possibility that what's written on the website is not accurate, or that we're misinterpreting it, but we'll sort of have to see. It's like I said, it's an ongoing thread on the 2+2.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody's saying, hey, Partypoker equals Full Tilt back in the day. I don't think that's the case.
No.
Publicly traded company. I'm not afraid of Partypoker going broke at all. I'm just surprised that they don't hold funds separate, and maybe it's just an oversight, and hopefully Party can look at that and revisit the decision not to segregate funds from operating in the case of insolvency. So again, nobody's saying that Partypoker is going broke anytime soon or anything like that. It's just a sort of a technical thing that we're a bit surprised that they don't have set up differently. Moving on. Now, a quick word from contendersclothing.com. This site is awesome for MMA fans like Terrence, and MMA fighters like Terrence, and Rocky fans like Daniel and myself. There's some really cool stuff here. And check it out, contendersclothing.com. Use code KIDPOKER20, going to get you 20% off. Guys, I was poking around the site today. They have Ultimate Warrior underwear. How awesome is that?
Yeah, I have Ivan Drago underwear. I have Clubber Lang underwear. I have Rocky Balboa underwear. I mean, if you were a kid that grew up with those kind of films and during the Karate Kid era or whatever, it's going to be a hotbed of stuff for you specifically, a lot of retro stuff, and they actually, I love the way they fit, and they're very, very comfortable.
Well, and that's the thing. It's not that shitty underwear, Stanfields or whatever that crap that we wore 20, 30 years ago. It's the new fancy, comfortable underwear with ball pouches, the whole bit. It's comfortable as hell.
Got to have your ball pouches.
What's that?
Got to have your ball pouches.
Yeah, when you're an old man, you got to have ball pouches. That comes in handy. But yeah, so you have the Drago ones, Daniel? I
have a little bit of everything, but the Ivan Drago ones, essentially, they're the old CCCP logo on the red shorts, and then I've got the light blue Clubber Lang ones, and then the black and yellow Rockies. I've also got Apollo Creed. His trunks, the USA trunks.
Those are great.
I got them all, man. Yeah.
All right, moving on.
I'd model them, but I think that's a little awkward.
I was gonna say, like, where do you wear them?
I wear them around the house, and I send pictures to specific people that are interested in what I look like in underwear.
Dick pics? Oh no!
Well, I mean, covered in underwear. Isn't that like what's the difference? I don't know.
It's
not unsolicited. Right? If they ask,
Test for a date. You're standing there with your Drago underwear, and they don't go, "You're an idiot." You found a keeper.
There you go.
All right, moving on. Things seem to be getting worse for Phil Ivey, and it's really, really getting to be a distasteful story at this point, because anybody who has any kind of gambling background understands how Phil just completely got screwed by the Borgata, by Crockford's in London. And it seems to have taken a turn for the worse. The Borgata is the place. So if you remember back, they're edge sorting at Baccarat. They told the Borgata, they told Crockford's what they wanted, their conditions for them to come and gamble in their casino. And both casinos said, okay, those conditions are fine. We will make those conditions exactly as you say, and you can come in and gamble. So they did. Those conditions led to Phil and his gambling partner to win about $10 million at each place. And then Crockford's withheld the money at the time, and then refused to pay him, got a court judgment against him. But the Borgata didn't. Borgata gave him the money, then sued him after, and they won. I think it was 2012 was when they actually played, and then it was in the courts for a while. But now they filed. I think it's an appeal looking for triple the damages to the $10 million that Ivey hasn't returned yet, because this is 6 years ago. Phil's gone on about his life, and it's $10 million is a bigger deal probably now than it was back then when he was a member of Full Tilt Poker, etc. So now they're looking at like a $30 million judgment against Phil and his partner. And, the Borgata has unlimited access to the best lawyers in the country. They obviously have won their case up to this point, and it seems like it's getting harder and harder for Phil to get a reasonable, outcome of what's happened. So this is it gets worse and worse for Phil.
You know what? This is the hashtag LOL. Good luck ever getting paid $30 million. Like, give me a break. There's literally no way. There's just no way they'll ever get $30 million. They might try to file for it, but I'm sure that if a settlement offer came in around like 8 or 7, that the case would probably go away. It sounds just like strong arming, but the bottom line is this: Phil Ivey, sure, he's lives in the United States, doesn't need to, right? He can live in Asia, he can live a lot of different places. Obviously, that would mean he doesn't come to the World Series of Poker anymore and doesn't come to America anymore. But there's just no way. There's just no way that he's going to, be able to come up with $30 million to pay for this ridiculous thing. And I can't imagine sort of any judge would rule that he now owes $30 million in this case, but rather than the 10. This sounds like a pretty hefty amount of interest over the last few years.
I mean, Daniel, I don't want you to talk, about Phil's finances rather, but do you have a sense of, if the settlement did come about and it was some number, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 million, and they sort of arbitrated to that, is that something? I mean, how badly would that hurt Phil? Would he still be able to sort of play in these big cash games and make a living as a professional bankroll, taking that kind of a hit to his bankroll?
Well, listen, he's already been hit, and hit hard by all the lawyer fees. You're talking about, he had lawyers in the Croxford case, he had lawyers in the Borgata case that are studying UK law, and he's got different set of lawyers in America. Lawyers are ridiculously expensive. This is multi-million dollars of expenses just for lawyers alone, right? You couple that with him not getting the money from Croxford, from Crockford. They never actually gave him the $10 million that he got. Now they're suing him. So I think that he's basically, it's one of those spots where, what's the difference between bad to worse, really? Bad is bad, worse is slightly worse. But in the end, it doesn't make a huge difference, because it's either you're going to find a number that is suitable that you can pay, or you're not. And if you're not, that means you're never getting anything. Borgata, Crockford, whoever they are, they can play their cards however they want, but they don't have all the leverage they think they do because, again, Phil travels. He can be anywhere in the world. Obviously he'd rather be in Las Vegas or be able to go where he wants. But if they try to pin him with a $30 million judgment, good luck ever getting 20 cents. I think this is a spot where lawyers should come together and try to come up with a number. Any number that they're going to come up with is going to hurt Phil Ivey, of course. The good news is he does have access to some very high stakes games where, this kind of money can be won or lost in a couple months. Like there are games occasionally that, not saying that he's ever done this, but where in one session, one specific player lost $50 million in US funds, not Hong Kong dollars. So knowing that, and him having an opportunity to be in those situations, in those spots, because he's got, good friendships with a lot of people that run the games and things like that, he'll be just fine. As for these casinos that are trying to strong arm him, I think that, that's just pushing too hard. Like 30 million? What? No, that's not happening.
All right, let's move on to some Twitter.
You're going surfing on the internet.
Our buddy at Joe Ingram, at Joe Ingram 1. Has anyone else had this happen to them while playing poker? The river card comes, you miss your draw, everything in your head tells you this is a really bad spot or a hand to bluff, but your heart says, fuck it, go for it. This repeats until you bet, get called, and ask yourself, why did I bet?
I did this in the one drop. My God, that was stupid. I did it in a $1 million buy-in event where I was like, yeah, I could bluff here, but this is a really bad spot to bluff because Christoph's going to have it here. And as I put my chips in the pot and Christoph was thinking, I was thinking exactly what Joey said. He's like, why the fuck did you just waste 1.8 million in chips in this really bad spot?
I always worry. I mean, yeah, the reason he tweeted this is because everybody's had this experience. But that's the worst feeling when the guy's really just tanking and staring you down and doesn't know what to do. And all you're thinking, I don't know, maybe it's just me, maybe I'm self-conscious. I'm thinking in my own head, why did I do this? And then the next thought that comes into my head is, can anybody else see that that I'm kicking myself on the inside, that I'm just thinking, is that visual on my face that I'm the biggest idiot in the world and I just realized how dumb I am? Because then I'm making it worse. Yeah. I love poker. Five poker is the best.
Joey actually, he put in some work to break down the McGregor-Khabib fight after the fight. If you want to check that out, he made a pretty good video.
Joe Ingram's now an MMA commentator?
Apparently, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
All-around commentator. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this week, guys. Canadians, happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy some turkey. Thanks to you guys for getting...
Tofurkey.
Tofurkey, yeah. The subreddit, again, is reddit.com/r/.
It's a /. I let it go the first time. It's a /. The slash that starts down and goes up diagonally to the right is a /. It's the one next to the period. It's a /. The backslash is the one that's above the enter key.
Or just search DAT Poker Pod on Reddit.
Yeah, you should do that, but don't listen to what Adam does and put in backslashes.
Head on over, start some threads, get us over there talking, and we'll get some stuff on the show.
Yeah. Also, I mean, as the vegan here, I just want to mention that Tofurkey actually sucks. It tastes like rubber. It's awful.
Okay, what is the best brand of a fake meat if you're gonna buy fake meat for Thanksgiving? Real quick.
Well, Beyond Meat, but they don't make turkey. I don't think they make chicken, beef crumbles, and burgers. Beyond Meat's the best though.
Right. Beyond Meat has been a huge success in Canada. They rolled out these Beyond Meat burgers at A&W. For anybody who doesn't know, in Canada, A&W is a huge burger chain, and they rolled out these Beyond Meat vegetarian burgers, and every A&W is sold out of these things. You can't get...
I went to Toronto for my hockey draft, and every one that I called, because I was curious to try it out, they were not in stock anywhere in Canada.
Yeah, I think there may be some demand there.
Well, no, for sure. That's what's happening, is there's been a big movement, so they have to create a new plant. It's even happening at the Whole Foods. They're having to create a new plant because the demand has been so high, because they make good quality. It's good macro profiles. If that's something you care about, if you're trying to build muscle on a low carb diet. You could essentially go on a Beyond Meat diet, if you will, for a short period of time and really do well. And they taste really good too. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a vegan and it's, I haven't had meat in 100 years or whatever, but I've had other people who are meat eaters not be able to tell the difference.
And the good news is it leaves more regular burgers for you and I.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly.
Everybody wins. I got no problem with fake meat.
All right, guys. Thanks so much. Enjoy your week. We will talk to you next week.